Hey, so we're live. Conversation number what? 6 of 19.
6, yes.
So we have a special guest today, and he's working on joining right now, so we're going to let him work on that, and we figured we'd hit the live button so he gets no kind of pre-interview or nothing, which is great.
Coming in cold.
Coming in cold. Once he joins it, we'll bring him in. What do you think, Pat, while we're waiting on him, pedal of the day?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so we've been doing just like picking something off the shelf. And so today, with Eric coming on, we thought we would pick something a little more vintagey. I guess this qualifies, right? This qualifies as vintage.
Unfortunately, some stuff that we bought new is now vintage, yes.
Today's pedal of the day. And hey, Brian Landreth, good to see you. What would you say we're going to affectionately call him Uncle Bri now?
Uncle Bri.
If you didn't see yesterday's conversation, it was with Brian Landreth, and please check that out. It's a hoot.
So much fun.
So pedal of the day right here. DM2 by Boss, and let's get close up. Look at that. That is what you call authentic vintage grime in clubbing. That is actual relicking, right?
Yeah. Here, hold that. In the interest of our current times, could you hold that a little bit closer? Let me just kind of
if you could wipe that down a little bit here.
There we go. That's perfect. Yeah. I've said before that pedal I think actually has the blues. And that's not a Wazacraft, although you have a Wazacraft as well that you like the way it performs. But
right. And so the guest just joined us down here, so let's bring him in.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Sorry for the technical difficulties here. I ended up trying to do it from my phone, but I was like, nah, let me just pull up my laptop. It's so much easier.
That's great. So there's no pre-interview here.
We're doing this live.
We're doing it live. So, ladies and gentlemen, all we know our friend Brian Landreth is watching, and I'm not sure how many other people may be chiming in at this point. But this is Eric Gershenow. It's been, 20 years since we've
about that.
We went to college together. We met at Shippensburg University. I was trying to remember how we met, whether it was through a class. I honestly can't even.
So you were a bio major. I was a chem major, and we shared classes because as part of our major, we had to take like a similar group of core classes. So it was you, me, and then John hanging out. And it was actually, you were the first person to actually take me out to like a live gig, like a venue that actually catered to live music. So that was the first time we went out to Pappy's Pub.
I knew Pappy's was coming up.
Yeah. And you had the Jackson brothers playing as part of the back line, Mike Jackson on bass, Danny on keys. And then
you played with Blitzstein for years. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then Mitch was doing vocals. I think we walked in when they were doing a version of I Shot the Sheriff. Like, I'll never forget that. That was one of my favorite places.
And then almost killed you on the way home.
So yeah, something like that.
Do you remember the car doing like a 360 in the middle of the road because of a deer or something like that?
Oh yeah. Maybe we had a couple beers to drink too.
You might have. I did.
Yeah. Right.
So Eric, nice to meet you. And Jason almost killed me one time too. So I guess we got something in common.
We're heading in the car with me.
Yes.
No, this was a good one. I mean, this was a complete. We spun around a couple times, heading the opposite direction on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of sat there and looked at each other for a minute and put it and turned it around. So yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking you're the guy. So you're the guy that introduced me to the blues, really. We talked about playing. I think I took a drum set over to your apartment or whatever. You were coming up with some songs you wanted to do. You handed me an Albert Collins tape.
Mm-hmm.
First song I listened to is "Put Your Shoe on the Other Foot," put your shoe on the other foot, or whatever, and been hooked ever since. Lifelong, like, deep dive into that. You did the blues radio show over at Shippensburg University.
Yep.
And so we'd go over and hang out there. Yeah. And my first electric, I was telling Pat, my first electric guitar, I traded you a 12-string for.
Oh, that's right.
Which Eric,
that was like.
He hesitated to show you in case you waxed nostalgic and wanted it back. And I asked him two very important questions. One, was there a gun involved? And two, was he down on his luck at the time he traded? Both the answers were no, so it's his forever. You can't have it back. So if he shows it,
Yeah,
keep
that's
it.
right. That's okay. That's okay. I've got
There was
more than enough guitars.
Right. I have this very bad habit of never selling.
No duress. No duress.
So
Hashtag
probably one of your early ones, right?
Oh my gosh! Yep, the telly. I remember the telly. Yeah.
So, Black Mexican telly. It's like a 1992.
Nice.
So
yeah, I have a pretty healthy collection of guitars, at least one for every sort of flavor of sort of tone that you're looking for. I ended up accumulating a lot of stuff just because for the longest time I was playing pretty steadily in a wedding band, and we were doing a mix of, I mean, most of them were relatively high profile gigs. There's some really interesting stories there for sure. But a number of occasions where I was called upon to play maybe just one or two tunes that required like a nylon string. So I ended up going out and getting a nice Ibanez nylon string. Then a few that required a straight acoustic. So like over the years, just from necessity for gigs, I've accumulated stuff, and I've actually kind of broke the habit that most guitar players in particular, I would say, are plagued with, and that is this constant need to acquire gear. So like, right, it's always that, this sounds so cool, and then like you see the next flashy thing on YouTube or something, and it's like, I need to get that. But thankfully I've been able to kind of back away from that and focus on what I actually need, and moving a bit away from, say, live gear for, like pedal board stuff, amps, things like that, to investing more in audio equipment, pro audio for recording. So
you just upped the game. You haven't really changed. You just you've upped it.
Yeah, I've limited a number of things I'm buying to just really expensive, like big price tag items, right?
Right. So we started a YouTube channel so we could just buy it, play with it for a little bit, and then move it on. And
so you got the right idea.
Right.
You get enough of a following, then you start getting these manufacturers. You're like, yeah, sure, here, have this pedal. Talk about my pedal. Yeah,
right. And we've been working with quite a few recently, which is really cool. It's really nice.
No, that's super sweet. So I was checking out your channel and looking at some of the video content, which I think is great, by the way. So thank you for the contribution. The one episode I caught recently was the you guys were talking about Leslie pedals, so I wanted to just kind of bring some attention. If you look, I
saw that.
I noticed, and I'll do this.
Okay, you have that's your Leslie cabinet back there. Lovely.
So we haven't recorded. Is that a Leslie 16 you have sitting back there?
So I'm not sure what series it is. This was a cabinet. I'll tell you the story behind this cabinet. And as you well know, just based on the look of it, this is a post Fender, right? So Fender bought Leslie, if I'm not mistaken, and
Vibertone.
Yeah. So exactly. And then they just kind of revamped the look of the cabinets to look like an old Fender cabinet. So you've got the silver trim around the grill cloth on that guy, and then of course the black Tolex. And then if you look closely, you can see it's really deep. So it's got the 12-inch in there with just the spinning drum. And I ended up getting that cabinet. There was a period of time where, so again, the big gap of time from when we were in college, I lived in Maryland for a period of time and was working in like Rockville, Gaithersburg, and there was a music store there called Victor Litz, and I ended up doing some part-time repair work for them. So I don't do like guitar tech stuff. I'm more electronics. So I've done some amp repairs, some amp mods and such. And I was doing some repairs for these guys, and this one guy had this Leslie cabinet, and I was like, oh my God, I know what that is. And he said, yeah, some guy just dropped it off. He, I guess, just didn't want it or whatever. The only thing that was wrong with it was the power cable was cut on it, and it didn't have a foot switch on it. And the owner, Victor Litz, is like, he's like, whatever, if you want it, I'll sell it to you for $100. I'm like, okay. Got a nice Leslie cabinet for $100. I ended up building a foot switch. I found some components online because if you look at the back of the Leslie cabinet, there's I guess it's the power amp that actually drives the speaker where you plug in. and there's like this, it's a wacky, like I think it's like a 9-pin connection on it. It's very specific to that model. So you can't just like retrofit something to it. So I had to like hunt down some parts, and I found some connectors, and then just built a little box, a little tin box. You can get those like, you know, like Project DIY pedal board boxes or whatever. So now I've got a functioning Leslie cabinet that I don't really use.
Now, do you do that, the crossover thing with that, or do you plug straight into the cabinet?
I'll show you. Hold on.
He's going to bring the whole thing over. Nope.
If I can find it. It's floating around here somewhere. No, so I designed it so that it's more like the old pedal design. So there's the pedal that's got the foot switches on it, right? And then there's 2 sets of cables that run out from that pedal. One goes directly to the Leslie cabinet. The other one, you would connect the output from your speaker cabinet to, or the output from your amp to that. So then it would feed into that. So it looks like the design of that is to emulate the look of the old ones. It's more crude looking. It's just a tin box.
So this one is probably the exact same thing before it was bought out, but it's a 10-inch speaker, I think. So this is the Leslie 16. I think there was a 16 and an 18. The 16 was a 10 and the 18 was a 12. And it has this like weird cable. So you literally unplug your amp. You plug one of the cables into the back of the amp, and then you plug the speaker from the amp into the other spot. So it actually splits like a crossover, I guess. It splits like the highs and lows one place and the mids the other place. So you're running both. So you hear both the amp and the Leslie at the same time.
Oh, right. No, I don't think mine's as sophisticated as that. No, it's just saying it's not, say, splitting the frequency spectrum or anything to send to the Leslie. Everything is either going that way or to the amp.
Which is a little scary, because if something happens to that cable and it's from 1970 or whatever, and you can tell it's been, but it works.
It takes a while for your output transformer to start, getting pushed to the edge before it gets fried. You're reminding me of one gig I had years ago. I was playing with a blues band, and it was a pretty stellar night, I have to confess. It's one of those evenings, like it was like, it's nostalgic when I think about it. We were playing out in this field, big open field, just outside of Baltimore, and some guys just brought set up a rough stage and a power generator, and we're playing out in the complete wilderness. I mean, there's just a small band of people. Everyone's drinking beer out of a can and lighting a fire, and we're on the stage and we're rocking out, and a buddy of mine is like, here, play through my basement head, which if anyone's ever played through a Fender basement head, they sound amazing for a guitar, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. And this thing was just really sounding amazing, partly probably because the power transformer was being pushed to its capacity, considering the voltage coming from the power generator. So right when I was about to have this guitar solo and everything just sounding so incredible, all of a sudden sound goes out and I'm smelling this really bad smell. I turn around, there's smoke billowing out of the back of this basement. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I mean, in retrospect, it was awesome. I felt bad for my lead singer because it was his amplifier, but yeah, that was the one and only time I've actually fried an amp.
Wow. Probably not a great.
Is that when you learned to repair things, or did you already know how to repair things?
No, this was actually way before I started getting into amp repair. It was when I really wanted to get that old Fender tone, and at the time I was not making enough bucks that I could afford what people were buying them for, online. So I just decided to teach myself how to build amps. So
yeah, I got to play through a basement head that had been modified by Gerald Weber from Kendrick. It was pretty nice.
Nice.
So Jason knows him too. A friend of ours sent that away to Kendrick and spent a lot of money to get it, but it was awesome.
Oh, very cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, my pride and joy is sitting over here. I'll bring my laptop over here. This was something I picked up at a place in Beltsville, Maryland, if you can see it. It's an old 62, 63 Bassman. So this was actually someone took the chassis out and put it into, it's a 112 cab that was built for it. I had the original head cab for that, but it was, I picked it up at a place called Atomic Music in Beltsville. So quick advert for Atomic Music. If you've ever been down to Beltsville, Maryland, they strictly sell used equipment. They don't go through, they're not a distributor, right? So it's two guys that run the spot, and it's like almost like a flea market of musical instruments. You never know what you're going to find when you walk in there. And they have a lot of, they get a lot of weird stuff, especially considering, I'm sure you've seen like online, people who sell Fender amps that have been modded, or they put into a new cab, or someone swapped faceplates, whatever. They have all kinds of stuff like that there. And they're pretty open to trading. So
that's wild you mentioned that, because about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, I drove down to the Baltimore area and bought a keyboard from a guy off of Craigslist. And he had all kinds of gear in his house, and he was talking about Atomic Music because he went to college with one of the owners. So I heard, and he was singing their praises about the unique stuff they had in there. So there's the second endorsement for Atomic Music, right? So
you should definitely check it out, because again, you just never know what you're going to find when you get in there. Some things questionable, right? But then they have just tons of amps, tons of guitars, and it's kind of like free for all. If you want to go plug in, you don't have to go get a store attendant to, shadow you or anything. So it's a very relaxed environment, and the guys that shop are really, really cool.
Cool. So, Brian said that's a sweet amp. He likes that stuff too.
Oh yeah, it's the bass channel in particular, and I discovered this about the 63s, the ones with the presence knob on them. So if you look at the circuit, for any of those who are gearheads and actually follow tube amps and such, but the circuit on the bass channel is what really differentiates that amp from, say, the black face Fender Bassmans and the silver face. So when you plug your guitar in there, it's really trebly. Very trebly. So you can imagine, like, when you're running through, like, say, a super reverb with something with a 10-inch speaker, where you're getting more of those highs that as a guitar player, you really want that when you're on stage, right? Because you got bass behind you, even though you might be a rhythm player and you like that really creamy tone. In terms of people actually hearing you, you need to cut through the mix. You need those high frequencies, and that amp really delivers it. I mean, even through a 12-inch, that thing just sounds so bright, and when you turn it to 5, everything just starts to go into overdrive. It sounds so sweet. So the way I got this guy set up right now, I've been using this for recording. So I'm running into it's a Bugera, I think. It's those little direct boxes. So you run, it's basically a fat resistor inside. So you run the output from your amp right into the box. It has, you can run it. Yeah, you got one, right? It runs a pass through into your speaker, and so I have a volume that I can control from my speakers. So if I'm playing live, I can use it as my personal monitor. But then it's got a balance line out, which I run right into my recording rig. So when I'm recording at home, I can get that nice amp tone coming straight DI right into my rig. So it's really nice.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you use some kind of like speaker simulator then, or like the IR things?
Yeah, here, let me grab this guy here. So this is so here's my gear plug for the afternoon, right? So the Bugera Sleek. Anyhow, I had a different one that had more options as far as like speaker simulation, what you're talking about. This one really is just super basic. It's just a volume to your DI and then a volume to your amp speaker. That's it. I had one that was more high end, that did more speaker simulation, that I could change tone and things like that. But it was limited to the impedance coming out of my amp. So it was like an 8-ohm fixed. This one, you can do 2, 4, and 16. So then,
okay, so we did this Leslie pedal New X. sent us their Rocktree pedal, and when they did that, they threw in a mini studio pedal, which is has I think 11 IRs on it, so it has like a black face. What's that?
So it goes up to 11. Sorry.
So one more.
You can't not do that. But it has like, it has like a Roland Jazz Master or a Roland Jazz chorus, a deluxe reverb, a twin, a Marshall 412.
Oh, nice.
So it has all these different cabinet simulators in it, or IR. I guess IR is for the cabinets for the speakers. See, this is language I'm not super familiar with, but it sounds like you would take the box that you just had, run out of that into that before you go into your. Does that sound right?
For this here, I mean, well, speaker simulator. I'm not too familiar with the one you're talking about. For a while I was looking at doing strictly like digital, or have like a tube preamp and then go into like a digital speaker simulator. And that was when I first started getting into doing more recording, because I was thinking, I need to have something that I can sort of go between for live and studio. For a while I was operating out of a Boss ME70 pedal or 50 pedal. It does like amp modeling on it, and it's got effects into it. And I was running that into a powered speaker the powered speaker had obviously a DI, a line out, so I could run that to a mixer, say. So the guys who were doing sound for live sound for the wedding band gigs that we were doing, they would dial in my sound for the mains that way. And then I just used the powered speaker as my monitor. But I realized it was really weak. Like I only got so much volume out of those things, and the tone is a little brittle. So then I decided to like kind of go back to the tone that I really, really liked, and that's just straight tube amps. So my main gigging amp is a Silverface Princeton Reverb, which, I mean, those things are gold. You can't ask for a better amp than that. I mean, 15 watts, the thing screams, it's so loud, and it's so light, and I'm sure you appreciate having, and playing for a while, when you're like all young and you're like, you cut your teeth, you're like, I want that big amp, I want that loud amp. But then when you play enough gigs, you're like, my arm is hurting from carrying this big loud amp, that you're like, you want to get as compact a setup as you can for easy transportation, but still get that tone. And the Princeton does all that for me. So I actually have a really lovely Pelican case that I acquired secondhand, and my Princeton fits like perfectly in it. So when I go to a gig, I just pull out the handle. It's got rolly feet on it, and it's like I'm hitting the airport with my Princeton in a Pelican case. It's really cool. And then the same thing with my pedal board. I was doing digital for a while, and then I kind of went back to analog. So, but at this point though, I value a nice healthy mix of both. So if I'm looking for tone, which for me, that's like the number one essential, like effects are cool, distortion's all right, but I need to have a strong bass tone. So the Princeton gives that to me. But then if I need a boost, I actually have an MXR EQ pedal on my board. I set that to, I boost the mids and I drop the lows on that. So if I want to cut through for like either a solo where I don't want to be screaming guitar loud, I just want to like cut through the mix, and I'll just kick in the MXR EQ pedal and just boost my mids a little bit, and that really does the job. And then for distortion, I use an OCD. You can't go wrong with those things. They have such an amazing tone, and what's nice about the OCD is you can roll off your volume on your guitar, and it's almost like a tube amp in that regard. Like it doesn't keep that distortion, right? It kind of cleans up a little bit, and it doesn't sound brittle. If anything, it just kind of accentuates the sound that I already get out of my Princeton. But for modulation, I like to go digital. A lot of the stuff that I've heard and listened to from YouTube tutorials and stuff I've played with, the digital stuff for modulation sounds in some cases even better, and you can get it more compact in the digital format versus like I don't need 10 different analog pedals to get me what I could probably get in one single modulation pedal.
So what are you using, man? If you're using a digital modulation, what are you using?
So I'm actually using something that you can't find anywhere. Here, let me bring my laptop over to my pedal board. You can't find this anywhere anymore. They don't make them, but it is a damage control. You can see that. It's damage control, what's called a glass nexus. And what's unique about this pedal, it actually does have tubes in it. So it's part analog, it's part digital. But what I like about it is it has the basic modulation that I would need for most gigs, like chorus, or you get the...
I don't know, man. I'm thinking I could get 4 analog pedals on my board in the spot that you have.
Well, it is kind of big, and the other piece to it too is so one of the things that drew me to that, in addition to the big one, was most modulation pedals that have, say, multiple modulation effects built in. The one thing that they don't have is the flexibility to run those effects through, like, say, a digital delay and or a reverb. So the Glass Nexus actually has reverb, and the reverb sounds really, really good. So I can run that reverb actually through my basement, and it sounds perfect. And the controls are simple enough. It's all, manual, and you have stacked knobs, which are nice. So it takes, I don't know, it's putting a lot into a small footprint, which is nice, but then it has MIDI capability. So for me, that's essential, because when I go from song to song to song, I don't necessarily want to have to scroll through or manually have to adjust like a setting, right? I want to be able to just access that tone with a foot switch. So I've got, what is that? It's a MIDI Moose that I actually got with that pedal. So there was a Craigslist purchase, that find, and I jumped on it. But the guy was selling a MIDI Moose MIDI controller pedal with it, which is great. So I have a lot of presets built into the MIDI switch. So it just makes it easier for me.
What do you think of the?
Go ahead, Jason.
What do you think of the newer Princetons?
I can't say. I mean, I haven't played the ones that the reissue, right?
Right.
I'm in the sense that I want to play something that has been hand wired. So if something goes awry, I can easily crack open the chassis. I can whip out my soldering iron and I can fix it like within 15 minutes. Versus if you open up a lot of the the modern amps, right there, it's all printed circuit boards, and those things are designed not really to actually access, right? A problem with those things, and you crack them open, the way the circuit boards are built in there, they're a lot of times the pots, the volume and tone and all that stuff, they're built in directly to the board. So the way the board is sort of situated inside the chassis, you take all the screws out, but still you got to kind of work it out to get those the pots out of the little sockets on the chassis. It's a pain in the ass. So I just stay away from those things. Even though the older amps, right, they're old, but if you update the components and some of the wiring, and you just have more flexibility. Again, these are for gearheads, people who do amp repair. They tend to prefer the older amps. So,
well, I mean, I know like a new deluxe reverb reissue doesn't sound like a. And I was actually surprised to learn they have tube rectifiers in them, but I know, especially like a Vibrolux, like plugging into one of the newer Vibroluxes and playing one of my friend's old 60 whatever Vibroluxes, it's not the same. It's not the same.
No, it's not. And I don't know if that's just like.
It's not. It's not. It's not the same.
This just became a 12-step meeting.
That's horrible.
Well, the newer Vibroluxes don't have the tube rectifier in it, and so I don't know how much of a difference that makes. Mitch Ivanoff would always say that the tube rectifier made a big difference, but I had one time bought one of the reissue Vibroluxes. This would have been like the ones with the white knobs like 15 years ago. because I loved his 60s Fiberlux so much. It didn't sound, it's not.
No, just
Yeah.
good for you, huh?
No, it's not the same.
It's not the same. Selling these old classic Fender amps for like $1,000 up, right? Get that classic tone. But a lot of the homebrew amps, I mean, you got to make room for those. There's a lot of boutique amps out there that are really kind of cool. And if you're really a gearhead, you can do some research on, I mean, I have a number of books, like if I were to call out Kendrick's amps. Are you familiar with Kendrick amps?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one my friend sent his basement head to be modified by. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that guy is one of the leading experts, if you will, for that a lot of tube designed amplifiers. So, you know, the guy knows electronics, he knows tube circuitry. He's published a number of books that I actually have that really go a little bit deeper into specific mods that you can do to your Fender amps, which, I mean, one of the things that people like about them, again, is they're so easy to modify. I had an old black Bassman head that I ended up turning into it was a 2-channel, like it was a standard blackface Bassman clean guitar circuit. But then I took the Bassman channel, which most guitar players don't use, and I modified it so that it was what we call a cathode following circuit. So the old 59 Bassmans that people love, the 410 cab configuration with the tweed cabinet, those have that cathode following circuit, which is the essential design that goes into all the Marshall amps. So if you want that Marshall tone, except going through 6L6s, that's what the old tweed Bassman cab design is like. So I took that preamp circuit and then I built it into the bass channel on the blackface, and then in the back I just converted I converted the extra inputs on the front, right? Because each channel you have 2 inputs, one's for high and low, and I just converted one of those to be a foot switch and just built a foot switch so I could go between one preamp and another. So I ended up building in a master control volume for the Marshall style, the cathode following circuit, so I could get really nice Marshall distortion through 6L6s on the Bassman head. It sounded pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, so Brian said basically JTM.
What's that?
You can look up.
I was saying, Brian in the comments that that's basically sounds like a JTM.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
So people can look up Kendrick, but it's Gerald Weber, right? Isn't that the guy? Is it Gerald Weber? Is the guy?
Gerald Weber. Yep, you are correct.
Yeah.
Gerald Weber, and then the one website I tend to go through a lot. If I'm purchasing like components, I'll go through Hoffman amplifiers, or Hoffman amps, and he's got like every flavor of like capacitor and resistor under the sun that you would conceivably use for, say, doing an amp build. He's got blueprints. He's got drilling templates for cutting out your circuit board design. And it's just a really great website, chock full of resources for home build, like DIYers who like to do their own amp projects. All of it is, based around tubes and such. But it's that was sort of my go-to for a number of years when I was doing a lot of amp repairs and mods. So at this point in my life, I just don't have enough bandwidth to do that stuff anymore, unless it's like repairing my gear. But occasionally, like, I'll take a project under my belt and tinker with stuff. But for the most part, it's focused on recording at this point.
Brian in the comments said to ask you about Allen. He's been looking at Allen amps for a while. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I can't say that I'm too familiar with those. The ones that I was really drawn to for a while was the Fuchs. Are you familiar with those guys?
I've heard of Fuchs.
I haven't played them, but I've seen them.
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of those high-end amps that you see, like guys like John Mayer. He's got, like, you'll see that as part of his backline. But the reason why I was interested in those more so was there was a stint where I was really in love with Robin Ford. Listen to Robin Ford incessantly. And if you don't know Robin Ford, he's a jazz guy. He was sold by Miles Davis, but he's a guitar player. But he plays like almost like a horn player the way he solos. So
I just posted a Robin Ford video last night on our social media, actually.
Love him. He's a great teacher and a killer musician. But he's not popular, right? He's not pop music. Right. His stuff is more fusion jazz. And one of my favorite songs he did, Revelations, which is I think it's on a Yellow Jackets album he played with. It's such a beautiful, it's like a gospel tune, but you hear his guitar soloing over. It's like, whoa, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. And then just I had this one training video he goes into, he sort of breaks down that whole song and the phrasing behind it. But the tone that he gets from, if I'm not mistaken, from a Fuchs amp. I mean, obviously it's his guitar too, but
really, because he's the Dumble guy. He has the Dumble that is like the only amp he's played for like ever.
Oh, Ford?
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the Fuchs is, right? It's kind of more like a Dumble clone.
That's kind of why I was after it, because no one could. I mean, Fuchs is expensive, but no one can afford a Dumble.
Right. You can't.
And there's only so many in existence at this point. Actually, there was a music store I bought. I don't know if you recall in the video actually that I sent you for the Lazy Day. The guitar I'm playing in there, it's an old 70s Strat that I ended up putting in Joe Bardin pickups into. All my guitars I've upgraded to Joe Bardins, which those are the pickups that Danny Gatton put in his telly. So they're the dual rail pickups, and they sound so amazing. They're so bright. They're so punchy. But I had this old 70s Strat that I bought from this music store in Baltimore. It was like a closet of a music store. And it was like, this was the only thing I could afford. The finish on the guitar was totally stripped. So the finish in the video, that's how I bought the guitar. But like that was $500. But then the guy had a Dumble sitting in the corner. I was like, oh my God, can I play that? And he was like, no.
Yeah, I was in Nashville and at Carter's, which is very famous. They had John Mayer's old Dumble in there. It was $90,000.
Yeah.
Let's before you go on, let's give, if it's all right with you, we can play like a minute of that video. Just like from the beginning, just like a minute or so, and then I'll post a link to the video down here for people that want to go watch it.
Sure.
Is that good?
Keep in mind, this is older, so I rebranded sort of my music to harmonic frequency matching, which is what the other content that I sent you. But this was when I was first been in Philly for 10 years, and then initially just was pushing Eric G. So that's what you see in the tag in the front there. But
I think I just put the right link in the chat room. Here's just a taste of that video. Yeah,
sure.
Now is the sound coming through your speakers? Did I do that right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's coming through my speakers.
All right.
I've been working all day, with nothing on my mindset, getting back home and taking off these shoes. You see, it's been a while since I've gotten around to getting on down with a whole lot of nothing to do.
I noticed those Joe Bardin pickups, and I knew your affinity for Danny Gatton too at that time. So,
Danny Gatton, one of the.
Go check out that whole video if you're watching it now, or you're watching this now, or you're catch the replay of this. Make sure you check that out. And while we're sharing things, I had another video I wanted to share with you that I thought would bring back good memories for you.
Okay. Uh-oh. Should I be worried?
No,
I love
you
it when
should.
two old friends get together.
You'll love this. I just gotta make sure
I could use
it right.
I could use some blackmail material because I really like Jason's McCarty hollow body, and I'd really like an excuse to be able to get that from him.
Listen to this.
Oh, yeah.
Dinner's on the table, supper time. Gin and tonic with a twist of lime. My back's against the wall, I don't know what to do. Confidentially to you. Money, do I have it? Not a cent. Next week's paycheck is last month's rent. It's the same old story, no money and the blues. Confidentially,
I think we gotta at
to
least
you.
get through the bridge.
I'm out every night in the bars getting stoned, just drinking my life away. Sitting in a crowd and feeling all alone. Who knows how I'd feel if you would stay? The sun would be shining on you and me, and little ones would be bouncing all around our knees. But there's a simple reason why the story ain't true. That simple reason is you.
Anyway,
Oh, Don Judy. Man, I love that guy.
I thought that'd bring back some good memories, man.
Oh, yeah. No, so, yeah, Don Judy, we met him. He was a Pappy's goer, and he was living in Shippensburg at the time when we were going to school, and he opened up a coffee shop, right? Called it Marie's. And there was a period of time where I was helping him and his wife to get the place up and running. I mean, I was doing like this much work, but I came in and helped out a couple times. They were vegan, fed me some dinner. But to hang out in Don's living room and to listen to him play like that old finger picking style blues, that's, if anything, like, not that I play that very often, but that was a huge influence for me. And to actually, you know, sit there and watch him play, and he just did it so effortlessly, and with the alternating thumb bass line, and he did sort of like the standard tuning for like what Mississippi John Hurt would play, which is like an open G chord, I think.
Right.
But oh yeah, he was killer.
I remember going, like, sitting down in the coffee shop with him one night, him trying to teach me how to play that song. And, you know, he was around the Blues Society of Central PA for a long time. And I don't think a lot of people got what a treasure he was, because when he was a treasure was when he was kind of like by himself, just doing his thing. Like,
Oh my God. And he just, you know, he just made you feel just cozy and just welcome to be there while he was playing. It was a treat for sure. So.
Now, he played on the radio show, I think. You took him over to the radio show and had him play live once?
No, I don't think we had the chance to do that. I had a few guests that were on the radio show at Shippensburg, but the only one in terms of musicians was Beulah Mae, if you remember her.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yesterday
was a while
there was a conversation about songwriting with Brian Landreth, who was in on the chat, and I caught the line in that one that next week's pay is last month's rent. That's a pretty clever line in that first verse of that song.
Yeah,
about right. So what? I mean, wow! I can't believe it's already 45 minutes.
Right. They go
quick.
quicker than you think they would.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna hit the live button. We're gonna hit the live button any moment now. This was the pre-interview. That's right.
Just testing you here. That's cool.
So, yeah, what else to get into? Like, I mean, guitars. You want to get into guitars?
What have you been doing? You've been playing out pretty regularly, yeah? You're part of a.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was you. It's funny you say I took you to the first like kind of live music experience, but we both, I think, started experiencing the idea of an open mic together and going and sitting in. And for anybody who doesn't, probably nobody would know, I was really a drummer, if you would call it that, back at that time. So like, we would go to the jam. Eric would play guitar and I would play drums, and we would sit in with these guys that, we were two young college kids that didn't know anything. I don't even think you were 21, so I'm not even sure how that happened or worked, but
no one cared.
Yeah, you walk in with a guitar, all sins are forgiven, I guess.
College town.
That's right.
But I got involved shortly after college with the Blues Society Central PA and spent every Thursday night going to that and learning how to, there was guys like, you remember Mitch Ivanoff from Krypton City Blues, maybe?
Yep.
But all the like local blues bands, I get to hang out with those guys and play, and that's kind of where I learned to play, I guess. And then had a blues band or a jam band or whatever it was for a few years, and so did that, and we gigged a lot. And then the last couple of years, it's just been playing on Sundays, in the worship band at our church, and that's how I met Pat over here, because Pat is involved in that, and so him and I play most Sundays together. So that kind of led to the YouTube channel, right? So we play most Sundays together, opposite sides of the stage. He has cool guitars, he has cool pedals, he has cool amps. I have cool guitars, cool pedals, cool amps, and it just was like, well, we need to be able to come up with a way to
let our powers combine.
Right. Just sit down and talk about them and play and jam and whatever and hang out and not have it be for something just for fun for us to do. And that's where this thing kind of came from. And since we've been doing this is like, we've been doing it about a little over a year. And I mean, we've interviewed some of the major pedal manufacturers. David Barber from Barber Electronics came over to the house one night and did an interview with us. JHS, Josh Scott from JHS Pedals did an interview with us. And so and then like guys like Brian Landry, who's been in the chat, met him just through comments on the page. And so it's been kind of cool to like meet people, work with some of these companies that are out there. And
I think it's brilliant, dude. I mean, one of my, I would say faults would be that I don't engage on the whole social media platform a whole lot. Like I tend to like hunker down in the lab and just either I'm recording or I'm working on something, but I tend to like go in the cave a lot. So like I'll come out frequently or periodically when someone says, "Hey, you want to play?" Sure. I got a gig. You want to play? Yeah. So consistently it was the wedding band. And just to give some context here, I mean, I've been in Philadelphia since 2010. I moved back and forth a number of times. It's really sorted past, but eventually moving back in 2010. And it was, anytime you move back to like an area or move to an area, the first thing is you got to flood the open mics. You got to check out the scene, meet the players, see what's going on, because I hate to say it, but they're definitely like clicks, right? You got to find out sort of where's the social click that you really fit the most, because there's a point where it's like there's being on the scene, but then the ideal scenario is that you're playing with people that you just happen to be friends with, and you also gel musically. That's the ideal scenario, and it's so hard to find sometimes. So when you're in the city, though, gigs can be, well, in light of current affairs right now, there aren't really any, but and it's a sad state of affairs. Certainly, I know a lot of musicians who are hurting right now, and hopefully this thing resolves itself within a reasonable period of time, and those guys are able to get some kind of compensation to help kind of fill in the gap in the meantime. But steadily I was playing a lot of wedding gigs, and that was through specifically this R&B channel I had open. So in Philly, you have a number of music scenes. Obviously, there's sort of that rock singer-songwriter sort of Springsteen vein, if you will. And there's, it sort of spans the gamut, but you'll find, in addition to that, the other principal music scene that you'll find, the big music scene, there's the R&B and jazz scene. So there's a lot of cats that grew up in, playing in church around here, that a lot of these guys then play internationally with a lot of big names. So within the R&B side, I've worked with guys who have worked with folks of the likes of Michael Jackson and Patti LaBelle. The wedding band that I was in was fronted by a guy named Stephen Wise, him and the bass player of the Wedding Project, they lived in LA for a number of years working with Stevie Wonder. So they recorded, toured with Stevie, but then came back to Philly and ended up getting more in tune with the wedding industry because it's an industry. That's the thing. There's a lot of money that you can make in doing the wedding band scene. And, you know, there's a huge gradient in terms of quality that you'll find, just like any other kind of music, right? There's some wedding bands that are okay, they're average. I would say, you know, with the level of musical talent within the band, I learned so much. Like being in the wedding band, really, in terms of my game, upped my discipline factor by 10 for sure. I learned so much just playing in 5 years with those guys, meeting people, networking. It was a great experience. The lead singer eventually moved to Jamaica, so it kind of put a squash on the gigs. So, you know, maybe we might get together and do a gig once a year, but right now, or prior to everything kind of hitting the fan here, I was kind of laying back from the gigging out because, you know, after a while playing covers, it kind of takes a toll on you. And my interest has always been in live music. So I had my EP released back in April, very small, you know, at a local spot where most of the musicians that I was playing with, we all kind of hung out at that spot. It's very much a place where everyone knows your name kind of place. It's like your best friend's basement. It's the Dawson Street Pub for anyone who wants to know. It's in Manayunk, Philly, but really cozy spot. A lot of love and support for live music, and you can find my 5-song EP. It's on iTunes. Harmonic frequency matching. I go by HFM just because harmonic frequency matching is a mouthful, I understand, but that was just sort of the label for my first project. So 5-song EP, and I've got a lot of stuff in the works right now. So that's what my focus has been as of late in the studio.
Brian says he's heard about discipline. He wants to try it sometime.
Oh, yeah, it can be a little bitter tasting, but you know, it's really a trial by fire kind of situation. Really, it's the best way you learn. So it's like, okay, here's 100 songs, learn them in the next week. We got a gig next weekend. I've played gigs where I didn't get the set list until I showed up to the gig, and then like discovered there was like 5 tunes on the set list I didn't know. So thank God for the internet. And, you know, I tend to use the Real Book app on my iPad. So I use charts for reference, because you never know when you're going to show up to a gig and someone's going to say, hey, do you know All of Me? Or do you know like At Last by Ella Fitzgerald? And it's like, yeah, it's on my charts. So let me just pull my charts so that I can follow along. So, you know, no shame in having charts. But it definitely, yeah, man, it's like anything. You wouldn't show up to work without having your tools if you're a mechanic, right? You know, so if you're a guitar player, make sure that you've got not only your guitar, but you've got backup strings and a means to change them relatively quickly, or at least a backup guitar that has been, you know, tuned up so that if you break a string, you can quickly swap out. And make sure that your cables are properly soldered so that, you know, you don't want to be in the middle of a gig and all of a sudden have your sound cut out and go, why is that happening? And get to play a guessing game in the middle of a gig. That's never fun.
Does that dude have a kill switch on his guitar? Nope, he's got a cable with a bad
cool. How did you do that?
Does he play for Radiohead?
Yeah, right.
And so like all of this, the recording, the amp repair, the gigging, that's all kind of the passion and stuff, but that's not your full-time day job still, right? You're still working over in the chemistry world, right?
Yeah. So I've embraced both sides and really share with other people. Yeah, so I do music, but and I've been blessed that I've had the opportunity to play some high-profile gigs. But yeah, that's not my day job. I do the science stuff, right? If we go back to the beginning of the conversation,
right?
We're at school, you were biology, I was chemistry. So When I got out into the workforce, all the jobs were in biotech, biofarms. So I kind of got involved in that. And throughout my career, I've been on sort of on both sides of the fence, where I've worked in labs, but then I ended up going to a raw materials manufacturer and doing like technical support. So I got to be like Geek Squad, going out into the field and helping people working in the labs, putting my hands on different applications. So I've gotten this really interesting 10,000 foot view of the industry, which has been really great. And right now I've been working for a company that does contract manufacturing in Philadelphia for gene therapy based type stuff. So not to totally geek out here, but that's sort of the next wave of therapies that are more personalized. Right now, they're super expensive, like most drug therapies, just because of the process involved. So part of what my company is tasked in doing is figuring out how can we simplify these approaches to make it more cost effective to manufacture. But then the science behind it's really kind of cool. It's totally sci-fi stuff. And Philadelphia is really the hub for gene therapy type stuff, because you have Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and you also have the University of Pennsylvania that are really focused on developing these, a lot of like initial IP or intellectual property around this that they're then licensing to other companies. So you're starting to see an influx of companies that are actually coming to Philadelphia to set up shop to do gene therapy work. So, you know, it's been again, for me, a blessing to have the opportunity to be able to contribute to something like that, especially in this day and age. So yeah, total geek.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So I love it. Once again, I'm the kindergartner in the room, right? 2 scientists and a marketing major. Liberal arts education, lab coats, you know.
But you need to have that, because the science guys, again, like I keep my head buried in the lab. I don't like, I understand marketing, I understand social media, I just don't have any drive. So that's my, if I need to really if I want to get my music out there, I really need to partner with someone who is in tune with doing that. So my wife, she does theater, and she's really tapped in. She knows how to do social media. She does the marketing. She does promo video content, which is great. I write music for a lot of the stuff that she does, which is kind of fun. But me personally, I just don't have any motivation to do that.
Right.
Do you see Brian's comment there on the screen? I put it up there. He said, a guitar player that works on amps and a chemist. I think I might ask him for a date. Yeah, I mean, yesterday he was on. He was our conversation. He was the guest for the conversation, and Brian has just been following the channel for a long time, and we had him on, and you just have to go watch it. He's a trip. He's
funny, man.
Funny guy. Yeah, you'll be fixing to learn something if you.
That's right.
Well, if anytime you want to come down to Philadelphia, once the restaurants open back up,
Right.
we'll have to hit a spot, maybe do a little review, and then come back to the crib and play around. It'd be fun.
Yeah. We do need to hang out again. Need to get you. Well, you're not traveling as much anymore, right?
No, my last job, that's what I did almost exclusively. Yeah. It kind of burnt me out, but I'm game to travel. I love travel. Just little spurts.
Right. So, but yeah, it would be a lot of fun to hit a jam somewhere sometime and play a little bit. That'd be a trip. I have a feeling that, I mean, we've been going just about like an hour right now, and so I have a feeling that there's like a ton more stuff that we could have tapped into, but. I mean, there's always another time, so that we can do that. But I gotta tell you, Eric, man, it's been a blast catching up with you. And just from the moment I sent that text message to you earlier, and like, do you want to do this? Thinking about Pappy's and spinning around in the road, and Don Judy, the coffee shop, the radio show. There was another little coffee shop I think we went over and set up and played one. Just those beginning experiences as like young budding like kind of musicians and people that were into this and wanted to do it in the midst of chemistry and biology classes. It was kind of a fun walk down memory lane, so to speak.
Oh, no, totally. I mean, that's where everything was birthed, right? I mean, again, the first like live open mic I ever went to was with you. And then that's really how I started to get tapped into the music scene, which at that time I thought was, I mean, obviously compared to Philly, Waynesboro is much smaller, but still there's a decent concentration of talent out there. And I would highly recommend, I know there is, I'm trying to remember the name of the venue that's in Waynesboro, not Pappy's. There's another place that I know there's a Sunday night jam that's hosted by a couple folks that I know. One guy I know who's Tommy Borum, who's tied in with he was part of the whole Blues Society thing for a while, and he's hosted a lot of workshops every year when they had the Blues Fest. Tommy Borum, I know, hosted an open mic. Some good friends of mine. Oh gosh, Dennis Mickley, he works with Beard Guitars, which they made the resonators and some acoustic lines. And Denny was actually featured at NAMM. There was a little video clip that he posted. So Denny Mickley, Beard Guitars.
They're making good.
What's that?
One of their employees actually plays with us on Sundays too, so we know a little bit about what's going on over there. And what you say you're going to bring up their electric bat?
Yeah, they're making guitars for Gruen Guitars in Nashville for George Gruen. That might have been some of what they talked about at NAMM. So yeah, it's
nice.
great. We got to play a couple of them, an acoustic and an electric, non-resonator. Not for me. I don't remember if Jason what you got to play, but they are nice guitars built in Hagerstown, Maryland.
Yeah, so
that's one of our. It's on the whiteboard as potential field trips and interviews to go down there.
Oh, definitely. And Dennis Mickley, like I said, look him up. He's the sweetest guy you could ever meet. He was probably one of my number one influence. If I were to pick or put together a list of top 5 guitar players that influenced me directly, Dennis is definitely on that list because, again, when we first started going out to the scene in Waynesboro, Dennis was playing guitar for most of those gigs because he was just networked in with that crowd of musicians, and just a very tasty guitar player, very humble individual. And, what can I say? That had a huge influence on me.
That's cool.
So I do want to go. Let's go back to Waynesboro 1 second, because I remember thinking about this, walking into there that first time. 2 young guys. I get up on drums to play. You get up on guitar, and I'll say, this Eric, when he was, well, I guess it was probably like when you were 20 years old. He was killing Stevie Ray Vaughan on the guitar back then, and we had an open ticket to go play. He had an open ticket to go pay, and he got to drag me along to a lot of these things because they were getting him up because he was killing it. Absolutely killing it on guitar. Yeah, and I'm sure still is, but
well,
I probably don't play Stevie as much anymore.
No, I've been. I what can I say? Who doesn't love Stevie? But as if you want to learn and grow, you start to develop other guitar styles and then roll it into what ultimately becomes their guitar style. So I would probably call myself more a fusion player. I'm not as sophisticated as a lot of my musician friends I know here in Philadelphia. There's so many killer players, and a lot of them actually live right down the street from me here. I'm in a cozy little section of West Philadelphia. So there's tons of really great musicians all around here. I wouldn't, it's not Nashville, but it's pretty darn close. So actually, there's at least 5 guys. There's one guy who was the band leader for a wedding band that I've subbed for a couple times, who literally lives right across the street from me. So
that's cool. I was smiling because I know Pat was singing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I could just see it in his mind going.
Of course, I'm Carlton in that mix. I just can't win.
Man, this is awesome. This has been great to hang out. Mickey Settlemile jumped in here, by the way. Pat, just say hi to him.
Yeah, man.
This was cool. And the whole point, Eric, was just let's just hang out with somebody for an hour, have a conversation about gear, and pass the time. So if people tune in and watch them later, great. What would be the best, like, maybe I can go back in the description and add that hmftunes.com address. That'd probably be the best thing to add to the description if people want to check out more, or?
Yeah, sure. So I just discovered, unfortunately, CD Baby's music player, it's no longer part of their platform. So I had a music player that was built into my website that no longer exists. So I ended up just putting in a link when you go to the music page within my website. There's a link that takes you to the CD Baby store. My stuff's on iTunes too, if you want to check it out. But if you go to the website, the hmftunes.com, that has everything for, about the EP, about me, about a lot of the other musicians. So I've kind of gone out of my way to spotlight some of the other musicians that are featured on the album, because it really was a collection of players that I've played with that I was like, hey, can you guys contribute, a verse or a drum or whatever to the EP to get it done. So a lot of the talent that you'll see on there, like say, for example, on the video, just to point out, the sax player that's in the video, his name's Benny Barksdale Jr. He lives in New Jersey. He's played with a lot of big names. Like I think he played with Alicia Keys briefly, was on tour with her. He played with the Nightlighters, which is one of these sort of like old R&B acts from the 70s that most people probably wouldn't know. But if you were to YouTube the Nightlighters, you'd find a number of their tunes that are actually on YouTube, and you'll hear Benny sax on them. He's such a killer sax player. You'll hear him on one other tune that's on my EP. But again, there's Stephen Wise, the guy who was the wedding band leader. He's on the EP doing vocal harmonies for one of the tunes, and there's like a little bio blurb about him, and then there's links that are embedded within each person's bio to take you to that artist's music page. So if you listen to some of the vocal content, like there's one or two tunes I'm singing on, I'm not really a vocalist. I have a good friend of mine, Matt Spitko, who's a killer singer-songwriter, who he lent his vocals for most of those tracks, and you'll find links to his music as well.
Cool. I know we're wrapping up here. Mickey asked in the comments, what is in the collection back there on the wall? He's probably looking at all the guitars sent behind you.
He's looking at the naked lady picture right there.
Right.
Yeah, really quick. I'll if you want, I can just, since it is a gear review, right? I can quickly just sort of show you what I use when I'm in the studio recording. I have a Martin acoustic that it's just a $500 model here, but sounds really, really killer. I use it for obviously for acoustic tracks. I have a G&L bass that I use, which I get really nice tones with. I can get like really Fender I'm not really a bass player, to be honest with you, but it was like, what kind of model bass do I want to get that's really going to cover the spectrum of tones that I want for in the studio? And I run this into an FX tube preamp that's on my rack setup here, which, let me spin my laptop around. I'll just show you my recording setup here. So I'm running through all analog gear here. I invested in API preamps. So the 3124V is the 4 preamps in a single rack unit, which is stellar. They're like probably the best preamps you can get. And then I'm running post-production. I run all my tracks out. I'm recording through Focus right here, Thunderbolt. But then post-production, I just funnel everything through my distressor for compression. So distressor is sort of like a one-size-fits-all kind of compressor for, studio production, which is great. I mean, the quality of my tracks sound amazing, and really that's 100% of it right there. It's just getting a nice signal going to your interface. As far as other guitars, though, I'm playing through a Frankenstein Telly that I bought this body from South Street Music in Philly. It was like $50. This thing, I swear to God, is made out of balsa wood. It is light as a feather. And then, of course, you can see the Garden pickups that are right here. And then I've got a friend of mine because I like the V-shaped neck, he put this like Fender style guitar neck. So I got a Strat neck on a telly body here, which I think is pretty sexy. And then I ended up getting rid of, I don't like the slider switch. So I cut out a plate, just routed out a pothole for like a Gibson 3-way selector switch like that for my telly. It's just a lot easier to use. Personally, I like it. And then I have a Schecter that I use for like jazz stuff that too has barred-in pickups in it. And then I recently picked up a Gretsch with a Bigsby vibrato on it, because the Gretsch has that, it's like a blend between like that humbucker sound and a telly sound. And it just really lends itself for certain styles of music. And I'm like, I need to have that in my portfolio.
What's your number one? Your favorite guitar right now? That's
probably the one I play out with the most that I gig with is the telly. I still have that 70 Strat, but that thing, I think the body's made out of like ash or something. It's like, it's massive weight on my shoulders. Like I used to play gigs with that thing, but when you're doing a wedding gig, usually you're playing like a dance set for like 2 hours straight, and having this weight on your shoulders at the end of the night, my whole back would be all bound up and I'd have a splitting headache. So I'm like, let me not do that and play the light telly instead.
So did you sell? So the last guitar I remember you playing would be was an SRV Strat, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's no more. Oh, you mean the beat up one?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of what you played in college.
Oh, I had like it was like brand new, super expensive, high-end Fender Strat thing. It was like cherry red with some gray sparkly pick guard. So I've kind of moved away from that. I'm a huge fan of Frankenstein equipment, as long as it works. And then, if I can build it at home, I'll probably do that versus throwing out chunks of cash for something brand new.
I'm not sure if I remember it being a red Strat, but now that you say that, maybe. No, it's been like 20 years, man. I mean,
it's
a long time. All right. Well, I think we gotta let Eric go here. We told him an hour. It's been an hour and 11 minutes. Yeah, I think so.
Well, I totally appreciate the invite. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and again, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, man, we gotta stay in touch.
Definitely.
I think, I like we've said, these 19 conversations, right? We're just gonna do these. Doesn't matter if anybody watches. Doesn't matter whatever. We're doing them to pass the time. So I think with that, Pat, I'll let you end it, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, that's right. So I am PJ, which I can point at myself on behalf of the Beard, reminding you, no matter what you hear, you never have too much gear. Thank you, Eric.
You can never have too much.
Never.
Even if your spouse tells you it's too much, it's never too much.
That's right.
All right, it's ending.